Welcome, everybody. Shalom from Yerushalayim. This is Rabbi Cantor Shani Ben-Or. I see so many familiar faces, and I almost want to acknowledge all of them. But I know that we're together, and it makes me really happy and fills my heart with joy. I'm here from Jerusalem. As every year, I'm back to mark Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Day. Which is a holiday here in Israel, and to mark it together in new and different ways. And so in this next hour together, we're actually meeting on Jerusalem Day this time. We've been doing this for 4 years. I've been so thrilled to bring my family of Central Synagogue. If you don't know me, then I used to be the cantorial intern at Central Synagogue, and Central Synagogue plays a huge role in my growth as a emerging clergy person in Jerusalem as the first ordained cantor, and by default, Cantor-Rabbi by the Reform movement here. And so it's been a privilege to be able to connect Central Synagogue to initiatives that I really believe in Jerusalem, Davka, actually on Jerusalem Day. This year more than ever, we've already had opportunities to connect. I've been to the United States 3 times since the beginning of the war. I've even made it to the Central Bima. I've had opportunities to lead an online course through your adult education with the amazing Marina. I want to say thank you, and to Rabbi Sarah Berman and Rabbi Andrew Mendel. We had opportunities to talk about what's happening in Israel now, specifically with the relations between Jews and Arabs and Palestinians and Israelis in Israel right now, and it's a big part of my work. But today I want to kind of dedicate continuing those thoughts and thinking about what is actually Jerusalem Day. I know we meet every time on Jerusalem Day, but I want to make sure that we all understand what it actually is. Where does it stem from? How did it begin and evolve? I think when I'll tell you the story of Jerusalem Day, as I remind you every year, you'll understand why perhaps it's not an essential part of your calendar, wherever you're from in your congregations, because I know in the Central Synagogue, we have people logging on from all over the place, but why it's such a strong local experience. I was born and raised in Jerusalem, and this is part of my experience as a Jerusalemite. So I think you'll understand when I tell you the story of how it evolved. But more importantly, every year, we don't just mark Jerusalem Day together, but we try to think about it critically, try to think of how we can be proud with the type of Jews that we are and our values in a city like Jerusalem. And I show you every year initiatives that can enable us to do that, to not refrain from a day like Jerusalem Day that might be associated with a certain national narrative and a certain political party, but how we can do what we do as Reformed Jews, which is we don't, disown traditions when we disagree with them. We find ways to reclaim them and be innovative. And there are some really thrilling and exciting things that happen every year and happen this year too. And I even have my friend, Rabbi Dana Shalom from Rabbis from Human Rights, and I'll introduce you to her and to what they did this year, which I thought was really, really meaningful. So let's start. This is also before I begin, I'm just going to say this is also a kind of a follow-up session to an interfaith service that happened on Jerusalem Day that I'll speak about soon, that many of you joined me online to experience. And we'll talk about that too. And now I'll give you the context of what we actually experienced. Okay, so here we go. We're back on Jerusalem Day. I told Marina that she's my favorite person because of this amazing picture. And so these are our partners. I'm here to bring you a piece of Jerusalem and to not forget our hope and find our way to still be connected. I'm here on my own, but with me is Reshut Rabim, a forum of over 40 organizations of Jewish renewal that is pluralistic, that is cross-denominational, functioning in Jerusalem, funded heavily by the municipality, Keilat Zion, that soon I'll show you their initiative of this interfaith prayer for peace in Jerusalem on Jerusalem Day. Of course, Central Synagogue and Rabbis for Human Rights, but still you'll hear all about it. So where do we begin? The story of Jerusalem Day begins to evolve after the 6-Day War, even kind of really during the 6-Day War. Just to give us a little snapshot into history, soon I'll explain this image that we're looking at. The 6-Day War, as you know, maybe from the song Jerusalem of Gold, before the 6-Day War, there were areas in Jerusalem, including the Old City, that were not under Israeli rule. And after the 6-Day War, the more I read about it, the more I understand, we gained we brought those, we gained control of those areas in the city of Jerusalem. And it's one of the most iconic moments in our narrative and in our collective memory. I know that nowadays we speak of Jerusalem and we speak of the territories in Jerusalem as something that is very intentional, but it seems like historically it actually was never our intention in the 6-Day War to conquer those territories in Jerusalem. It was never our intention. The war progressed in a way that we couldn't even anticipate in Jerusalem. And our leadership decided to seize a certain moment to conquer the Old City, what we call nowadays here in Jerusalem. You can look at critically. You can call occupation and you can call the unification of Jerusalem. Depends what your views are. And here our story actually begins. And if you're asking me as a Jerusalemite, just a side comment, a lot of our experience in Jerusalem, you can understand when you understand that this occupation was not intentional. We never planned for it. We never strategized around it. Yes, there was a huge euphoria. And in fact, in that same famous song of Jerusalem of Gold, Nomi Shemer, after the 6-Day War adds a verse that you famously might know, shofar, what we see right here, so here's Rabbi Golan at the Western Wall at 1967. He heard that morning at 7 a.m. that that the government decided to take over the Old City and to unify Jerusalem, and he decides spontaneously, and again, I stress spontaneously, because I want us to remember that this is a spontaneous act, that event that occurred in our history. He decides to take out his shofar and says, I'm going to go, and if this is happening, I want to be there. Till then, again, Jews did not have the same access that we do nowadays in the holy sites of the old city. Of course, there were Arab residents there, and soon we're going to talk about that, which is not mentioned in Omi Shemel's song. Rabbi Golan grabs his shofar and goes straight, to the Western Wall. And as you can see, he has a kind of, he has a little Torah scroll, he has a shofar, but obviously this was not planned. It was something that was like spontaneous, just like the whole event occurred. 2 days later, the chief rabbinate, gathered and said, we have access to the Old City. Old City is now part of an autonomous Jewish state. We must mark this in some way. And they start thinking of a holiday called Jerusalem Day. This is coming from the chief rabbinate, the ultra-Orthodox chief rabbinate. By the way, I'm just going to pause to take a breath and say that when I'm done this kind of segment, this part of this introduction, you're going to be able to ask questions before Dana, my friend Rabbi Dana, introduces you to one of the initiatives I want you to be aware of and proud of. So you can write down your questions, and I'll have time to answer them soon, shortly. So the chief rabbinate gathers, and they start talking about what are they going to do to mark this, for them, spiritual, ecstatic event. And they start dreaming of a Jerusalem Day. And a year later, in fact, they publish, and this is a picture from this encounter, the first Jerusalem Day ever. It was a very small, humble gathering that the chief rabbinate took out like a little poster that they published in the newspaper. And they said, we're going to do a prayer at the Western Wall to mark a year from the war. And so that was the only thing that they had said. They had discussed what they're going to do with Hallel, what they're going to do with certain prayers, and they created this gathering. And what they didn't know was that tens of thousands of people from all over the country are going to flock to Jerusalem, and that they were going to be the only ones that actually did something to mark this year since the event, since what was remembered as a huge victory within the Israeli population. And so, in fact, they even tried to get this Jerusalem Day to be recognized by the government. They tried for it to be recognized through the municipality. The mayor then, Teddy Kollek, had hesitations. They felt like a day like this is not the right thing to do a year after in the anniversary. They didn't want to make, quote, the local residents of the old city, the Arab residents, they didn't want to make them feel uncomfortable. The city had just went through a huge transformation, and they were concerned. They didn't want this event to go out of control, and they also thought it would be perceived poorly internationally. I am talking about 1968, and I'm not talking about the dynamic that feels very relevant to now, but things were very, very heated. And the chief rabbinate succeeded to convince the Supreme Court, and they did this humble gathering. And ever since, it became a tradition for years and years to gather at the Western Wall, and it became a huge event. Now, we can be critical of the notion that's very one-sided to celebrate the unification of Jerusalem, which, by the way, is a problematic term. I already said is a problematic term because it's viewed as also occupation, right? There was another side living there. And so it could be viewed as very problematic to mark it in a celebratory manner and not take under consideration, like the mayor of Jerusalem wanted to do, the real tapestry of the residents of Jerusalem, also the Arab residents. That being said, I think we could see that the chief rabbinate went into a no man's land and offered something spiritual that a lot of Israelis needed. They wanted to connect to Jerusalem a year later in some kind of a way. Was it exactly the way the chief rabbinate offered? Not for sure. But it's what then molded Jerusalem Day to be what it became. And so in 1998, a law was passed to make Jerusalem Day a national holiday. And what you see is called the March of the Flags. And this march is the way, and it kind of continues that same narrative that came from the chief rabbinate, a way to say Jerusalem is one, this is the unification, Jerusalem is ours, of the Jewish leadership in the Jewish state. And this march is something that goes through all of the areas of the old city, of what then became again the occupied territories, in a big shout of victory. Unfortunately, it's not a surprise that when something began very one-sided without nuance, complexity, our partnership, our sensitivity to other residents in the city and other minorities, then the environment of the March of Flags is very nationalistic. It's right-wing, which I don't have any issues with being right-wing politically. That's totally part of our pluralistic DNA. But the problem is that it's become a day in which there's a lot of violence, vandalism. I can say towards the Arab population in Jerusalem. I study at Hebrew University. My students don't come, my Palestinian students that are 20% of our students out of 25,000 students of Hebrew University in our 4 campuses. Often in my dialogue programs, the Palestinian students and Arab students are just absent on that day. They don't say it in advance necessarily. They maybe even intend to come and they're scared. For instance, at the gates of the old city, they tell me, my students, that in this March of the Flags, they yell death to the Arabs, and it's become something within that vein. So what do we do? What do we do when something like a Jerusalem Day comes together that on one hand touches on our need as Israelis to be proud of the potential that Jerusalem has, to be a city that is really so central to our Jewish identity, is the capital of our country, that was transformed so quickly into something else, and yet we are also here. The liberal sector of Jerusalem, Reform Jews in leadership, Jews of all different types, people with different types of views. How do we connect in that day? For many years, myself, my friends, people that were born and raised in Jerusalem, just like my Palestinian students, we would just kind of refrain from being anywhere near the March of the Flags. It made us feel extremely uncomfortable. Yes, we want to be proud of Jerusalem, and yet not in that kind of a way, not in a way that's not tolerant towards other residents and makes them feel unwelcome here. And so this brings me to an initiative called This is Jerusalem. And this is why you're here. You're part of the initiative, yay, of This is Jerusalem, because you're participating in one of our programs of This is Jerusalem. Zot Yerushalayim, This is Jerusalem, is an initiative by Cantor-Rabbi, a forum, as I said, of about 40 organizations that are very, a variety of organizations that have, different Jewish views, come from different Jewish traditions and cultures. Some of the organizations even do things that have to do with coexistence and interfaith, like Rabbis from Human Rights that we're going to hear now. We're all under this umbrella. And we decided in this forum, that's called Cantor-Rabbi, we decided that Jerusalem Day No More will be a day that will make so many people feel unsafe and ashamed. And we want it to be a day where we're proud and we can be working towards change, because we're also here residents of Jerusalem and we want a different Jerusalem. And so every year, this organization, this forum, supports initiatives that are alternative. Soon we'll hear about two of them. One that you participated in, many of you, named the Believers Ceremony, and the other is the March of Rabbis for Human Rights, the Interfaith March in the city of Jerusalem, as an answer to the March of the Flags. There's also a March of Flowers, for instance, where instead of waving flags in the old city or in areas, the march also goes through areas of East Jerusalem, very controversially. There's a march through this forum of Cantor-Rabbi of handing out flowers to the residents of East Jerusalem and not coming with flags. So there were over 55 alternative Yom Yerushalayim events this year. What happened in them? So this is an example of one of them. You can kind of give a shout out in the chat if you were at this service with me. Ma'aminim of Kilat Zion, of Rabbi Tamar Elad-Applebaum, who's a senior rabbi. They have ongoing interfaith activity and involvement. And on Jerusalem, leading up to Jerusalem Day, they take their kind of clergy group called Amin from all different faiths and denominations, and they created this service called Believers. So what does it mean to be a believer, and what does it look like to have an interfaith gathering on Jerusalem Day when something like the March of the Flags is happening? I'm going to show you a little bit just so you can remember. Here, I see they're saying the service was amazing. I know. And just so you know, because you guys joined, and you've been joining for 4 years, they translated the service, and I translate source sheets for you every year. And so the wider global audience can enjoy Believers and not only us local leaders and residents of Jerusalem. And it was fabulous. Oh, I'm so happy to hear that you guys were there. Okay, so for those who were there, this is just going to be a little reminder of how this whole event opened, I think in many ways. And for those who weren't there, you'll be able to understand a lot about the event just from how they opened it. So let's do that. And then we're coming to an end of this part. Okay, here we go.
sisters and friends. Please let me ask, please let me sing peace to you. For all of my brothers and friends, for all of my sisters and friends, please let me ask, please let me sing peace to you. This is the house of the Lord. I wish the best for you. This is the house of the Lord. I wish the best for you.
Okay, we can listen to that all day long. In fact, I wrote my rabbinical and cantorial thesis about this special congregation, Keilat Zion, but I want to hear more our voices and I want to hear more your voices. I also saw Cantor Josh Breitzer here, who was my advisor for my recital. So it's really special to have you here with us and to continue to explore Keilat Zion. So let's give just pause a little bit and give a little time for questions. If it's okay, Marina, I am going to ask you for help. I don't know if in the chat, maybe people have been asking questions if you've seen, or if you want to raise your hand and ask a question. And then basically we're going to move forward because this year in the Believers service that they do, there was another amazing partner who joined, which is the Organization of Rabbis for Human Rights. Rabbi Tamar Elad-Applebaum that you saw and many of the other clergy people in that video are part of Rabbis for Human Rights, including myself. And they actually joined this initiative and did a program from the morning, but then ended this event. So we want to hear about that. Any questions for me?
I will say, if you want to say your question out loud, please raise your hand using the hand raise function. The one question that comes in the chat is more of a logistical one. Is it possible to get the translation available now that we don't have the Zoom recording?
Okay, that's a great question. So you can have a translation of the service, but, and I see Ami, hi Ami, are you in Israel? Are you in New York? Who even knows? So soon we'll get a question from Ami. But what I will do is send you, Marina, through you, the link of the source sheet that we did that has translations, for instance, of the song we just heard, and to other prayers and songs. So it won't be a running translation of the service, but at least the music you'll be able to hear, and I'd be happy to share that resource of, I saw you got the YouTube link together with our source sheet, you'll be able to follow a little more of it. So yeah, the YouTube link does not have the Zooms were, I know it was key, Nancy, I totally agree with you with speaking. So the Zoom link was the only one this time that was translated. Ami, bevakasha, bechavod.
So it's great to see you, and thank you for your blessed activities with all these organizations, to all the people who are involved. I just wanted to ask, for the benefit of the people on this Zoom, was there presence or any issue around the Mishpachot Chatufim, the families of the hostages around Yom Yerushalayim this year?
Okay, that's a really good question, Ami, and I'm gonna make that a bigger question in the sense of, I just gave you the history of a day that is highly sensitive, that's an understatement, and tense, and we're not in a regular year. So I'm gonna take your question to, you're asking about the families of the hostages. You saw that all the leaders, for instance, had the pin that shows solidarity and hopes for their return. But in general, what does it mean to do this kind of activism of interfaith, dialogue and coexistence, and raising that type of voice of tolerance during a war in which, you know, the violence was not only right, it was not only one-sided, and we know the tragic implications all around. And I want to say that this year, so I don't know of, in some of the events, there definitely was the 55 initiatives. There definitely was presence of the, it's called the tent of the families of the captive. For instance, even in a different area of activism, this year, Pride March of the LGBTQ community connected to the tent of the families of the hostages and put a big emphasis. The whole Pride March in Jerusalem was dedicated to those who were murdered and who were taken hostage or from the LGBTQ community. And we also saw that within the initiative of This is Jerusalem. Specifically in Believers, they made a lot of changes in the ceremony you just saw. For instance, it used to be in the courtyard of the Hartman Institute, which is, you know, outside, very festive. They put it inside. They changed the content. They definitely spoke to those who said, Nancy, that it was key. They spoke about, you know, the violence toward the Jewish population at the 7th of October. Not only the Jewish population, we have to say, but the loss that we suffered, including the hostages, as well as what's happening in Gaza. It was really interesting to hear how they brought what they brought, but they changed the music. It was less upbeat. It was different messages, and really more in a place of nechama, of trying to be in a place of mercy and compassion, and less in a place of pride. That was kind of what we did in the years before. Last year, I'll just end with this, and I'm going to move on to Dana, Rabbi Dana. Last year, the Nasi, the president, Herzog, he gave a blessing in our Maminim Believers service, and it wasn't that kind of an event this year. It was something much more low key, less formal, and less festive, and in a different notion. So that's my answer to you. I hope I answered. It was very complicated this year, and there were a few musicians and other people that used to take part who actually dropped off due to the war. But as you saw, it was a beautiful team of leaders. So that was about that. And there was, as I said, now I want to move towards Rabbis for Human Rights, which is an organization I'm hyper proud of being part of. We have Rabbi Dana Shalom with us, and she is, beyond the fact that we were both ordained together, Rabbi Dana Shalom is currently now the head of the Rabbis Network for Rabbis for Human Rights, and she can tell us a little bit about what Jerusalem, how they mark Jerusalem Day within their community, how it connected to the Maminim Believers ceremony. I'll just say Dana has a lot of experience with activism. She also in IRAC was in charge of social media, which we all know of and support. With the open house for the LGBTQ community, sorry, Dana, in Jerusalem. She's faculty at Hebrew Union College. She's one of our own, brilliant, and really for a long time for me is very inspiring in terms of holding that voice of activism and change. So now as the voice of Rabbis for Human Rights, I'm going to let you take it away and tell us about how your day looked like that day where we finished with the Believers ceremony.
Thank you so much for this lovely introduction, Rabbi Shani. Our name in Hebrew, by the way, is sort of roughly translates as rabbinic voices for human rights. So Kol Rabbani. So we're counting on you to help us enhance that voice and make it better, because some of us don't have the gift of song the way you possess it. So yeah, so we're actually recruiting more cantors, if you know of any. So hi, I'm Rabbi Dana Sharon. Like Shani said, I'm the head of the Rabbis Network for Rabbis for Human Rights. I would like to start, before we sort of dive into this highly packed, controversial topic of the Jerusalem Day and how we navigate it, I want to say a few words about Rabbis for Human Rights, kind of in general. Rabbis for Human Rights is the only organization that sits in this crossword of where the two circles meet, Jewish organizations and human rights organizations. So there's very small overlap. I think it's mostly us that are kind of carrying that load of saying that in the state of Israel, how we practice Judaism and how we use our Jewish language and our Jewish voices is very political often. And the liberal camp has kind of stepped away from owning to that fact that our religion has been heavily politicized in this region. So we have taken upon ourselves to create this different kind of impact and different kind of conversation where we remind ourselves and others the fact that Judaism has actually a lot to say about how we should handle the poor and the weak and the marginalized. And that stand has been edged out of the Israeli public discourse. So that is our main goal. We were interestingly, we're one of the only rabbinic non-denominational organizations in Israel, which means I'm very proud to say, we have many, many members at the moment, we have 145 members, rabbis from all over, almost, from Reconstructionist, humanistic, secular rabbis, which is a very common notion, but somewhat a common notion in Israel. Mostly HUC people, mostly Reform rabbis. I'm super proud to say our HUC alumni show up for this cause in a really grand, wonderful way. Some conservative and a few modern Orthodox. That is kind of the division. And when our organization were founded in 1988, let's hold in mind, things looked very different. The days were the days of sort of the dust settling around the first Intifada. And there was this notion that we're going to figure this out really soon. We're going to get ourselves out of this conflict and this situation really any second now. However, while this is happening, we have to have a better code and a better approach and a better attitude toward toward how we treat the population, the civil population in the what we call the occupied territories. Mostly, we work with the West Bank. We work exclusively in the West Bank and the Jordan Valley. We have no contact with Gaza and that area, and very low contact with more contact with East Jerusalem, but not nothing in the only in the sea areas, so only areas that where Israelis are legally allowed to go. That is our notion, and the beginning was just to sort of make sure that those people, and here we differentiate ourselves from organizations that take care of civil rights, because a lot of the cases and a lot of the population we are dealing with are not actual citizens. This is something that we need to understand. We need to understand that a lot of the Palestinian population, both in East Jerusalem and in the West Bank, are actually not a citizen of any nation, and that makes everything much more complicated, because it means a lot of the aid systems that we can approach when we have been wronged, if we are fortunate enough to live in a liberal democracy, are inaccessible to them. So this was the raison d'etre. Just let's make sure that until we figure out this conflict, the people who are involved in it as let's say non-guilty parties, the innocent bystanders almost, have the best life possible, kind of. And it started very small. It started with helping out with the olive harvest, the Israeli helping out Palestinian, which means helping out Palestinian farmers getting to their land that is often inaccessible to them because of the way that the region is divided. They have to be escorted. So this is kind of how things started. We are now a much larger organization. We have an educational department where we deal with trying to educate young Israeli people in their gap year before the army about, first of all, about human rights. Secondly, about the occupied, I'm going to call them occupied territories. I know that is not everybody are using that term, but this is the term we use internally. So this is the term I'm going to use. And it's very easy, I think, for Israelis not to know what's going on, not to know how this reality looks like. So many young Israelis, they don't even know about the settlements, how they started, how people started settling in those regions, Jewish people, the fact that this is actually, at the beginning, a lot of this was illegal. And it's a lot of it still is illegal, and there is the issue of the fact that these laws are not enforced. So many young Israelis they have no clue, and they will go into the army and they will have to deal with this population, and they just don't know. They're just completely oblivious to those issues. So this is a major thing we're doing. We're still helping out to Palestinian shepherding and agricultural communities. That's a big thing for us. Our social justice department does wonderful work within the 67 borders, taking care of mostly Jewish Israelis, often immigrant Jewish Israelis living in poverty, trying to make sure that the government and the parliament are creating policies that are taking into consideration the needs of people in poverty. And they have this incredible advocacy program where they train people in poverty to self-advocate. It's just beyond amazing. And then there is our main project that we're here to talk about, that is taking up a lot of I'm happy to say is taking up a lot of my time, is our interfaith work, which we've increased in like 1,000% after October 7th, because we felt as an organization we are one of, I think, the first organizations that started working really quickly after October 7th. Avi, our CEO, almost Rabbi Avi Dabush, lives in Kibbutz Nirim, which was one of the kibbutzim who were attacked. So he spent 7 hours in a safe room with his family, followed by 30 hours in the kibbutz's public space, waiting for the army to get there and for them to be evacuated to Eilat. And we all sort of joke that he got to Eilat. I think he got a couple hours of sleep. He washed his face and he got us all together on a Zoom call, asking us, what are we doing? What are we saying? What is next for us? And we came out of that meeting saying, first of all, we are about to demand immediately, and we have not changed our perspective, we're about to demand the immediate swift return of all the hostages safely home, alive, not alive. From our Jewish perspective, as you know, it doesn't even matter. We want them all. Of course it matters. Of course we want as many of them to be back alive, but those who are unfortunately no longer with them, we want to bring them to Kever Israel. We want to be able to give them a proper Jewish burial. So that was one of our main pushes from very early on during this situation. Right fast after that, we've joined the organizations calling for a ceasefire, and definitely and over the last few months calling to increase humanitarian aid in Gaza. We take that very seriously. We've also been trying to minimize the impact on the West Bank Palestinians, who a lot of them had authorizations to work in Israel, who were provoked immediately. And these are already really impoverished communities. Often those work permits were almost the only thing that enabled them to sort of survive their day-to-day life. So we're seeing also a lot of increasing poverty in these communities. And we said we have to do interfaith work. We have to find the people in this region, the people of faith, the people of religion. We've seen what happens when religion is weaponized. We've seen it in its ugliest. Let's show people how it can be used differently, how we can use our religion language to promote peace, to promote understanding, to promote the sanctity of life, to promote the taking good care of our neighbors, not eliminating them. We've heard that, we've seen that, we've heard those rabbis, we've heard those imams, we've heard those priests and ministers for centuries. Let's change the discourse. That was one of our main goals since October 7th till now. We have been really fortunate to have really incredible partners. Here in the picture, you can see Avi, who I was just mentioning, marching with Sheikh. I beg your pardon, I forget his name, but he's from a Bedouin community. We're seeing Rabbi Tamar and Ibtisam, of course, Radir Hani and Rabbanit Leah Shakdiel, all of those incredible individuals who have been our partners from very early on. Now, this is the Interfaith March. We march in Jerusalem this Monday. Like Shani said, we were marching towards Iruah Ma'aminim, the believers' prayer, sort of speak. And I want to acknowledge the fact that it is very complicated often for us to mark those occasions and those events and those sort of, let's say, Jewish holidays, because from an interfaith perspective, and when we seek to have true partnerships with other religious organizations, that means we have to consult our partners. We have to take their perspective into an actual deep consideration. So some of our Palestinian partners told us, I don't want the Jerusalem Day to be reclaimed or reorganized or let's say whitewash in any way. For us, this is a day of occupation. For us, this is the second Nakba. For us, this is a really, really terrible day. And what we said was, we hear you. Having said that, we are, from our perspective, we are obligated to create some kind of a mirror image of the March of the Flag. We are obligated to, instead of march through the and Shani was described it kind of very kindly almost, because the March of the Flags doesn't just go through every part of the old city. They're targeting the Muslim quarter. They're going through the Nablus Gate, which is traditionally a Muslim Palestinian territory, and that means not only are there, this is kind of a portrayal of almost Jewish supremacy to some extent, and it's very, very, and they're accompanied by the police, and they're accompanied by border patrol, and there's all those foreign forces in that space that is usually a safe space for people who doesn't have that many safe spaces. And when we were talking about March, where are we going to march? We told our Palestinian partners, okay, let's give the police the exact same route of the March of the Flags. And they will, of course, they won't authorize us to march through those unsafe parts. And then we can say, wait, this is discriminatory. Why is this March of the Flags can go, but we, a peaceful march for peace and human rights, don't get to go there? And our Palestinian partners told us, thank you, but no, thank you. Even if we don't want even a peaceful march, because even a peaceful march is escorted by police. You will still be increasing police present in this already overly policed region. And to that we said, okay, because this is what a partnership looks like, right? We're all settling, we're all sacrificing, we're all kind of in this conversation together. We were really, really lucky. We got to have a lot of really incredible partners who kind of really were really willing to literally meet us halfway. We had a Palestinian arrowhead marching from the Nablus Gate to the new gate, and we had a Jewish arrowhead marching from Zion Square to the new gate, where we met, and we all marched to the Jaffa Gate together. So yeah.
Sorry, sorry for cutting you off. We're just getting, also people are starting to engage, and I think maybe it's a good time, if you want to wrap up with one sentence, to see if we can also move to people's questions, including one great question, which is how to support this interfaith work, which I think is the dream of every rabbi, to be asked by friends in the world, because it's exactly what we need and what we want, I'm sure. So yeah, so do you want to kind of wrap up, and then if anybody has a question, you can raise your hand.
No, just that we were really, I think it's a nes galui. It's an obvious miracle that we were able to do this during this difficult year. I think this was a beacon of hope for everybody involved. And it's so significant for us to be able to sort of echo and enhance those collaborations of people of different faiths that all share the ideas of basic humanism and love of all mankind, not just my kind.
Thank you. Sorry.
With pleasure. Thank you all for having me.
Thank you, Rabbi Dana. So if anybody wants to raise their hand and ask a question, now is the time. I'll say about the question of how can you support in the diaspora, the interfaith work that's happening here, from the lines of This is Jerusalem initiative, and until this, all the stuff that we just heard, the important work of rabbis for human rights. I want to say that I think you don't need us to be able to go into websites and stuff like that and find and donate, and all that stuff is really, really important. I can tell you that more than that, the reason that we're sitting here and when we do gatherings such as these, and I would encourage us to think more and more of ways to connect and talk about this stuff. I feel that it's really important for us to know the leaders doing this work and civil activists that that there are Israelis that really care about this stuff and are really working really, really hard. I know, and for me, I know that that's not like a concrete thing you can do. I urge you to join our newsletters. I urge you to, I put in the link for Rabbis for Human Rights and Reshut Rabim, and soon I'll put in Keilat Zion, and all of that is very, very true. But I have to say, as an Israeli and a rabbi doing interfaith work, that sitting with you, I see all these friends coming time and time again to hear what I think about Israel right now, to learn what we're doing. I know that right now in North America, you're dealing with such a harsh polarization and dichotomies, and that sometimes you can't allow yourselves to be nuanced and complex because associating yourself with something like, for instance, a ceasefire can put you in a machaneh that you don't necessarily identify with the rhetoric. But I want you to know that there are local initiatives that think like you, even if you feel like you can't say it out loud, and that we're here for you and we need you to be here for us. Dana, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just to thank you and to sort of piggyback off that, to make it very clear, Rabbis for Human Rights is a Zionist organization that deeply believes in the right of the state of Israel to exist and is deeply invested in a prolonging future for this country, which is why we are so adamant about peace, because we truly believe that this is the only way that we can have a long, prosperous future here in this region. And we're only accepting Israeli members to our lines. You have to be either Israeli rabbi working in Israel, like Shani and myself, or you need to be someone who isn't necessarily Israeli but is serving here or working here right now, or we make exception for Israeli rabbis who are at the moment serving congregations overseas but wish to stay connected with us. But we are, again, very, very, we take this really seriously, that this is local and this is in a very deep sense grassroots. This is a members organization, and we take our members' opinions and perspective very, very seriously. And this is something that's important to hold in mind. We're not by any means wishing to abolish Israel or anti-Zionist or disown the idea of Jewish sovereignty or sign up to this crazy colonialistic notion that is happening. Sorry, don't quote me on that.
It's a safe place. But yes, that was really, really important, Dan. I think I want to just say to my friends here, and the reason that I'm part of Rabbis for Human Rights and all of these initiatives is because I want for my Palestinian friends at this point to have what I have. I'm extremely Zionist. And when my grandmother in Baltimore sang about, the flag of Israel before the foundation of the state, I believe she has a right to do so. And I don't think that that's a privilege. I think it's a right for a nationality to have a place to express themselves and be proud of. And I want that. I want that for my students. It's part of my Zionism because I can understand it as a Zionist. So we don't have an issue with the Israeli flag. We have an issue with, like you're saying, the supremacist that comes with it. And so I think we are coming kind of towards an end. I feel like you kind of asked us how you can help us. And I think we feel like also we want to help you feel
Absolutely.
right. I mean, we know that you can't express yourselves in every place the way you would want. And that's okay. Timing is important, and you protect yourselves and take care of yourselves. We're holding that space for you. You have partners here that see things in a complex way, that want a better future, that are Zionists, proudly Jewish, liberal, and seekers of peace, and believe in also rights for all, and are hurting what's happening in Gaza and want the hostages to come home. All of this is true, and I believe is extremely Zionist. I really, really do. because it's the country we want to live in, not the country we want to die for. So we really, really, on Jerusalem Day, thank you for joining us for something that's a little different, learning a little bit about how this whole thing began, witnessing different rituals and ideas and ways of doing it. I'm going to finish obviously with a song. I'm going to take it from, sorry, Rabbi Dana. Next time you can do solo when we invite you. Well, you're never going to come back. But we'll finish with a song from the Maminim ceremony.
Oh, I'm contractually obligated to come whenever you ask.
So we take this piyut that says it's kind of like a celebration of the fact that we're all one, that God is one. It's obviously the way that we can interfaith and our types of faiths that exist here, we can connect and be together. And so here it is. I'm going to put on the slide and we'll end with music. Okay, here we go. And by the way, I'll put in the chat, but in your source sheet, you can also take a look at this mother's prayer that was put together and recited in 3 languages in the Maminim program that we put the link on in your chat. So be sure to grab that before you go as a spiritual gift of resilience and peace for wherever you go. So here is the piyut. Kol biruei מעלה ומטה יגידון כולם כאחד אדוני אחד ושמו אחד יגידון כולם כאחד אדוני אחד ושמו אחד 32 נתיבות שבילך לכל מבין סודם יספרו גולך מהם יכירון כי הקול שלך ואתה המלך המיוחד יגידון כולם כאחד אדוני אחד ושמו אחד ובדברי קודשך כתוב לאמור, this part you know, שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. Happy Jerusalem Day. Yes, we can be happy. We can be happy. להתראות. תודה רבה, Rabbi Dana. Go to your children. It's 8 p.m. here. I don't know why I'm in the office.
Like I told everyone in the chat, thank you so much for having me. Rabbi Shani has all my contact info. Feel free to reach out and keep our conversation going. Thank you again for taking the time to spend it with us.